Well, Dave, you know I love sharks, and
I do
certainly
too.
we're going to talk about rigging techniques
yeah.
here at the CCA workbench.
Yeah.
So
I bet I knew much about sharks in 1979 than Guy Harvey, because I was in them, boy. When I was a little kid, first time I ever went offshore was a shark trip, and my father took me to see Blue Water White Death when I was 7 years old. And, and I was into sharks from that day forward. I read every novel, every book that I could come across, every National Geographic that had a shark story in it. I was on it. I love sharks.
Well, then how come our level of retention seems to be so low?
I have no idea. It's just, you know.
So how are we going to catch them?
Well, in Florida, we're very lucky. We live in a warm water area. There's sharks all the way from Jacksonville to Pensacola and everywhere in between, all the way around the coast. You can stop and find a shark. The first shark fishing I did was under Pineda Causeway inshore. You know, we had a bunch of little sharks. I couldn't even tell you what they were, but we caught a lot of sharks back then in the 80s there. And it wasn't much left, actually, because of all the nets had taken the mullets and everything. But, you know, shark fishing has always been dear to my heart. And one thing about sharks, you know, you have to understand is they're very sensitive to stuff in the water, both electrical impulses and chemical trails like blood and stuff in the water. They're measured in parts per million, the stuff that they can identify and follow. And so whenever you're shark fishing, the first thing you want to do is you want to put out some stuff that's going to get them to come, which is usually bloody bonitas or barracuda really works really good.
That's my favorite.
A bunch of fish heads on a chain, you know, anything that'll put out a lot of scent and not oily stuff that'll float. You want stuff that'll, you know, disperse through the water column.
Right.
You know, because oil, all it does is float on the top of the water, and the shark ain't swimming on the top of the water. He's underneath of it. So you want stuff that'll disperse underneath. And once you do, you know, you want to fish with them with some wire. You know, sharks have very sharp teeth.
Big, heavy rod?
Yeah, you can, you know, it depends on what you're doing.
The depth.
Well, it depends on where you're fishing. Also, you know, if you're fishing inshore under Pineda Causeway, this thing will catch every shark.
This Azor,
Yeah, that
80
Azor,
perfect, 65.
65S, and you know, and a nice 7-foot rod. It'll catch every shark that you come across inshore.
Right,
now,
so
once you get offshore, you want to use a 30 wide minimum. You know, if you're chasing big sharks, you know, over 200 or 300 pounds, and you want to use a circle hook, you know, because we want to let these things go in good condition. And a circle hook, you know, does that. It finds its way into the corner of the mouth. And, you know, it doesn't hurt his internal organs. You know, we don't want to gut hook these fish and then let them swim away to die later.
Right.
So, you know, so we want to keep the fight times to a minimum. Use as much drag as you can. Sharks aren't known. There's a couple of them, like the thresher shark and the mako, who put up a really good fight for you. But most sharks don't really fight that hard. I mean, we even catch great big tiger sharks in Australia. 1,000-pounders, we'll catch them in 5 minutes. You know, because we're using all the 90 pounds of drag, and sharks just don't like the long drawn out fights. They just can't. They're muscular. Their muscles or whatever it is. They don't take long fights very well. They're not going to die on you, but they're just weak. They come straight to the boat pretty quick, especially a blue shark or one of those kind of sharks. But in Florida, they actually have 4 different groups because, you know, we hit them pretty hard commercially in the 80s when a lot of other fish went away. They opened up sharks commercially, and they got hammered pretty hard for a while. And but now we have 4 groups. One is prohibited, you know, and group 1, there's no size limits, and those are for little sharks like Atlantic sharpnose, black tips, bonnet heads, and a shark called a fine tooth. I probably wouldn't even recognize it. And a lot of these sharks look very similar. So in group 9, the species, they have a 54-inch minimum.
I mean, group 10,
Yeah,
9 species.
Group 2. I'm sorry. Yeah, they have 9 species, and there's bull, nurse, spinner, blues, oceanic white tips, poor beagles, short fin makos, and thresher sharks. Now, a lot of these sharks I wouldn't want you to ever keep, even though you can, like the oceanic white tip. That's not a shark you want to be eating, and it's, you know, and they're endangered. And a bull shark, there's nothing you're going to want to eat on a bull shark, nothing. And a nurse shark either. And then we get down to, you know, there's prohibited sharks like angel sharks, tigers, whites, you know, the scalloped hammerhead. You can tell him from the Caribbean reef sharks. But, you know, the key is to identify them. And go online, go to FWC. They have My Florida FWC. They have a lot of posters and a little things that you can go through and identify. Does he have this? Yes. Then you go here. If he has this, we can go down here. And you really want to make sure that you identify this species. It's hard with a lot of these little ones. They look a lot alike. So if you have any doubt about what it is, let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go.
That
And
was
don't
some-
put live sharks in the boat for any reason.
See, Dave,
Because they'll be wearing them. I see those pictures. These guys smiling with
you
their
must-
shark. The
you
next
must
picture is
have-
the guy with the shark on his
You
face.
must have been talking to Mrs. Harvey because
No.
that's why we don't put Makos in the boat. But we'll get to that a little later. All right,
yeah,
Bree.
see, Dave, you do know a lot about sharks.